The big idea of today's lesson is people who are ready for storms survive storms. People who are ready for storms survive storms. This is one of a handful of acted out parables. Jesus told a lot of parables, but he acted out a few. One of the classic ones was when he washed his disciples' feet and he told them, "You go serve as I have served you," and he acted out that parable. And in this way, he acted out the idea. He orchestrated the circumstances of life to communicate to his disciples, storms are coming. And indeed, storms did come to those disciples. 10 out of 11 of the remaining disciples were martyred for their faith, and tremendous storms came to them. And Jesus wanted to communicate that lesson, that storms are coming, and storms are coming into your life and my life, and people who are ready for storms will survive the storms. I heard the story about a hotel down on the Galveston area coast where the storms recently came through, and this particular hotel did not sustain any damage. The whole first floor was built out of concrete and was a parking garage, and they moved all the cars to higher ground, and the whole hotel was built with extra strong glass and concrete and steel, and even though it was in the eye of the storm, it did not sustain any damage. And the same thing can be true of you. You can sustain the storms of life and sustain that if you are ready for that storm. Before we get into that, I want to mention a couple of things. I did a video recently. I've got a video series I would like to invite you to look up on YouTube. Look up do a search for the word Disciple Making Teachers on YouTube. You'll find a new channel that I've created. And I did a series recently on how to muzzle a talker. And I've got quite a few number of views right away. Just started that. But one of the people responded to me and said, "My problem is the opposite. I can't get people to talk." And around that same time, I visited a classroom that looks like this. I'm going to show you a picture here. And if your classroom looks like this, I would encourage you to get people to circle up. And if you can't get people, maybe you got too many people in the room to circle up, but you can get them to face each other. And I think you'll get people to talk better if you can get them to face each other. And we are transformed more by what we say than what we hear. And I would encourage you to take a look at that. Opening question you might consider with your group is, state your name and the worst storm that you have ever been in, the worst physical storm you've ever been in. And I think about a storm I was in the Atlanta area. And it was wintertime, and we actually stopped the conference early because the storm started to come through. It was supposed to be a really bad one. And we had to go to about half an hour away. It would have been half an hour away if the storm wasn't there. And it was awful. I mean, big snowflakes the size of your hand, and just lots of them, and the whole road was covered up, and you couldn't see the stripes on the road. You couldn't see the side of the road. You're tempted to pull over, but you know it's just going to get worse and worse, and you don't know about the traffic this is coming behind you. And I've never been so glad to get to where I was going in all my life. And those storms remind us that spiritually speaking, storms are coming into your life. And you might get your people to talk a little bit about a physical storm. If you can get them safely talking about something they're comfortable talking about. They may not be comfortable talking about theology, but they've all experienced some storm sometime in their life, and they'll talk a little bit about that. We don't want to spend too much time on that, but spend a little bit of time on that, and I think they'll open their mouths later. All right, here's our text, Mark 4:35 through 41. That day, I draw your attention to the word "that day." As I was thinking about this idea of storms, I did a search on Amazon and found Max Lucado's book, "In the Eye of the Storm," which is all about a study of this particular day. Now, he's not looking at it from the Gospel of Mark so much as I think Matthew, but this particular day, he draws attention to that word "that day," and he talks about all the things that happened that day. And I encourage you to get that book and look at all the things that happened that day that were stormish, if you will. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." I draw your attention to that next phrase, leaving the crowd behind. Leaving the crowd behind. They took him along with them and went. And the lesson I get from that is everyone, even Jesus and even you, needs a little R&R, needs a little rest and relaxation and recreation and just a little bit of time off from time to time. One of my all-time favorite verses, Psalm 127:2. "In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. For God grants sleep to those he loves." I love that verse. Sometimes in the afternoon, I'll take a nap and say, "Thank you, Lord, for granting sleep to those you love." And it is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. And we need to work and work hard. But 6 days you shall labor, and 1 day you ought to rest. And Jesus himself modeled this by resting and taking some time off and leaving the crowds. And sometimes we need to leave our work and get some time off. You might get your people to discuss this. Describe a time when you were utterly exhausted. Spend a little bit of time talking about that. All right, verse 37. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drowned?" Now draw your attention to that opening phrase there. A furious squall came up. And what that tells us, the first lesson was everyone needs a little R&R from time to time. The second lesson is storms are inevitable. Storms are inevitable. Another book I found looking in the Christian section of just did a search of the word storms, the Christian section of books on Amazon, and found Jim Simula's book. And I'll confess I didn't get a chance to read that one. Just will recommend that you might. And or might ask somebody in your class to read that, an informed group. I had somebody email me this last week and they said,